Public prisons are those owned and operated by the government. As such, they're responsible for all the costs at the facility. Sometimes, certain areas will be outsourced to private companies, such as catering companies, cleaning services, and so on. These facilities are also not operated for profit. Their goal is to house an inmate for their sentence, then make sure they don't reoffend upon release. As for private prisons, they take a large burden of responsibility away from the government. The government is in charge of supplying prisoners and overseeing the facility, but the private company is responsible for the day-to-day running of the prisons. So the government's like, hey, we'll supply the prisoners, and then you supply the stuff, private companies. That's the simple breakdown, in case you were wondering. These complexes are run for profit, and sometimes it can be very lucrative. In 2015, the two biggest private prison companies in the U.S., Geo Group and CoreCivic, made a combined revenue of $3.5 billion. And those two operate a little over half the private prisons in the United States. A private prison is paid money to house inmates by the government, only as long as it's cheaper than what it would have cost the government if they were doing it themselves. Often, the company is paid per inmate. Typically in the U.S., the government pays the companies between $60 to $130 a day per inmate. So on the high end, a 1,000 capacity facility will be getting $130,000 every day, which is $47.5 million a year. The difference between how much the government pays them and how much it actually costs to house the inmates is where the corporations make their money. Due to this, a private prison would favor their inmates to reoffend when released. Between the year 2000 and 2016, a study found that the number of people locked up in private prisons had increased 5 times faster than those in public prisons, while the number of inmates in private immigration facilities had increased by 442% over a similar time frame. Because of this, some governments have added financial incentives to encourage corporations' motivation to lessen the reoffending rates. We have an example of this a little bit later. For an idea of how much it costs to run a private prison, in 2016, the UK government published their figures for costs in the public and private sectors over the previous year. For public prisons, the overall resource expenditure came to £2.3 billion, or $3.2 billion. The private facilities came to £508 million, or $609 million. At the same time, the UK had 14 private prisons, so on average, each prison costs £36.3 million, or $49.3 million to run every year. Based in New South Wales, Australia, is the Clarence Correctional Centre, a private prison managed by Serco that's also the biggest in the country with a capacity of 1,700. Opened in July 2020, the prison has nearly 969,000 square feet of space to house those incarcerated. The facility itself costs 798 million Australian dollars, around 608 million American, to build. In 2017, Serco announced a contract to run Clarence Correctional Centre until 2040. The contract will provide the company with 2.6 billion Australian, around $2 billion US dollars. The government of New South Wales were originally hesitant about the facility. However, they changed their minds once they found that the local economy would be boosted by 560 million Australian dollars, 427 million American, over the next 20 years. In 2019, Serco brought in £3.2 billion, or $4.4 billion in revenue, but it was also the year of big fines for the company. Due to manipulating financial figures over their electronic tag contracts, the company was fined £22.9 million, or $31.2 million. In 2014, they had to pay the Ministry of Justice £68.5 million, or $93.5 million, that they overcharged the UK governmental department. In 2015, the brand new Auckland South Corrections facility in New Zealand was opened. The cost of building the prison was stated to be 270 million New Zealand dollars, which is around 195 million American dollars. The facility is operated by, guess, Serco. Serco has also been given an incentive to keep reoffending rates down at the prison. If they achieve at least 10% below the offending rates across other prisons in New Zealand, Serco will make 1.5 million New Zealand dollars, or 1.1 million American dollars, per year. In 2017, the new government in charge announced they want to stop building new prisons and to end the use of private prisons. In the prior year, Serco was fined 8 million New Zealand dollars, or 5.8 million American dollars, due to accusations they organized fight clubs at the facility they ran, Mount Eden Prison. The government also took the prison away from Serco when the contract expired in 2017. However, the contract of running Auckland South Corrections Facility means Serco is in charge until 2040. In 2019, a number of contractors, including Serco and G4S, were found to have been paying UK immigration detainees as little as £1 an hour for cheap labor to cook and clean. The contractors stated that their detainees did around 45,000 hours of work for the cost of £45,500. According to reports, paying this little meant the companies could have saved more than £2.5 million, or $3.8 million altogether. In Texas, United States, is Reeves County Detention Complex. Built in 1986, it's currently being managed by GEO Group. This facility specializes in offenses by immigrants. It has a capacity of 3,763. The facility has come under fire a number of times with its treatment of inmates. The prisoners were unhappy with the poor quality of food, the lack of legal resources, using solitary confinement to punish those with medical problems, overcrowding, and poor health care. And because of this, on December 12th and 13th, 2008, a riot broke out. While it only lasted about a day, $1 million in damage was caused. From the 31st of January to the 5th of February 2009, the prisoners rioted again. This time, the facility received $20 million in damages. In the 2006 contract between GEO Group and the county's authorities, Reeves was paying the company $4.34 million annually. In return, the county received part of the per-inmate pay that the facility gets from the Bureau of Prisons. In 2009, the county made $3.1 million from this deal. Representatives of the county have said that the cash kept them afloat. During 2014, GEO Group bought BI Incorporated for $415 million. This company specializes in electronic tagging technology. In 2015, GEO Group brought in a revenue of around $1.8 billion. From 2004 to 2018, BI received nearly $500 million alone from the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE. ICE is stated to be the main source of income for private prison companies like GEO Group and CoreCivic. In 1996, Park Hospital, a psychiatric facility, was closed in Bridgend, Wales. In its place, a new prison was created, HM Prison Park. It's operated by G4S and is currently the only privately managed prison in Wales. It has a capacity of 1,652. The cost of creating the new prison was said to have been £82 million, or $112 million. Over the years, the prison has been inspected a number of times by the government. In 2004, it was described as the worst privately run prison in Wales and England. G4S doesn't have the best reputation when it comes to running prisons. One of the worst cases was when they were in charge of Birmingham Prison. On the 16th of December 2016, a riot erupted at the jail. Poor conditions stemming from unreliable hot water and electricity, poor food quality, inadequate health care, and low staff numbers were the cause. While the riot only lasted 12 hours, the prison sustained £2 million, around $2.7 million in damages. The government stated that the cost would be paid by G4S. Only 2 years later, G4S would be removed as the managing firm as the government took back operations.